reached at his meeting with President Trump in Alaska were opening the way to peace in Ukraine. How utterly cynical. What followed the summit in Alaska was not peace, but the brutal bombing of innocent civilians across Ukraine. In particular, just days ago, Putin unleashed the second largest aerial attack of the whole war, killing at least 23 people, and as the Secretary of State just confirmed, including 4 children. And of course, bomb damage included the British Council in Kyiv. We join the government in utterly condemning the attack on the British Council and pay tribute to all their staff playing their part in our national endeavour to support Ukraine, and pass on our best wishes to the member of staff who was injured in the attack. We note that the Chief Executive of the British Council, Scott MacDonald, promised to continue operations wherever possible. Can the Secretary of State outline to what degree this has been achieved and what support the government has provided to assist? If Putin really wants to open the way to peace in Ukraine, as he said, he should recognise that the blame for this war lies squarely with his territorial ambitions, and that all the civilian and military bloodshed that continues is wholly the result of his unprovoked and illegal invasion. But the reality is Putin does not accept this basic fact. In his speech today at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, Putin is also widely quoted as blaming others for the war. In particular, his long-standing refrain that the war was caused by, and I quote, the West's constant attempts to drag Ukraine into NATO. Without ambiguity, we and all our allies must see that the war in Ukraine is a question of a free and sovereign democracy invaded without provocation by a bullying dictator. That is why, when we were in office, it was right to provide such strong support to Ukraine from the outset of the invasion, indeed even before it commenced, and why in opposition we stand shoulder to shoulder with the government in continuing that policy. And that is why we need to keep tightening the screws on Putin's war machine. Moscow should be denied safe harbours for its tankers and profits, and Europe should ban Russian oil and gas sooner than its current 2027 deadline. The Euro-Atlantic alliance must lead a new pincer movement to further constrain Russia's energy revenues and stop Putin getting his hands on military equipment. So I'm glad that the Foreign Secretary will have more to say on sanctions, as the Secretary of State said, very soon. But can he confirm if the timeline is directly linked to US action? And would the UK go ahead with those plans for tougher sanctions if the US for some reason did not? On any potential end to the fighting, we all desperately want to see peace in Ukraine, but we're clear that this must be a lasting, sustainable peace, and that is why security guarantees are so important. The Secretary of State referred to President Trump's commitment to make security guarantees, and he quoted, very secure with the Europeans. What further detail is he able to share on the likely shape of any such US security guarantees? On the coalition of the willing, he states this would, and I quote, secure the skies and seas. This seems to miss out the land force element. Does this mean the army would only be sent to Ukraine in a training role? He says that he is, and I quote, reviewing readiness levels and accelerating funding to prepare for any possible deployment. On funding, does he expect that to come from the Treasury Reserve or from the existing MOD budget? And on reviewing readiness, what is the timescale of that review, and is he yet at the stage where urgent operational requirements are being considered? Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, I strongly welcome the news that Norway has selected the Type 26 made in Scotland for its future fleet. This is a huge deal that will support thousands of jobs, but also one that has been many years in the making, with significant input and progress under the previous government. In December 2023, I myself had the pleasure to visit the Norwegian MOD in Oslo, and I can assure the House that the Type 26 was very much at the top of the agenda. Just to remind them, that was in the same week that we announced that Britain and Norway would lead the maritime coalition supporting Ukraine's navy, underlining the strength of our naval alliance and our joint commitment to Ukraine. It's clear that a key reason for Norway's decision is that they face the same Russian threat as we do from Russian submarines and want the best possible capability to respond, maximising interoperability with the Royal Navy. But that Russian threat arises entirely from Putin's pursuit of aggression rather than peace, and until that situation changes in reality rather than rhetoric, we must continue to be robust in doing everything possible to support Ukraine.
Secretary of State.
Thank you. Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome his endorsement of the success in securing the Norway deal. I do have to say to him there was certainly groundwork done under the last government, and he led a lot of that in as Defence Procurement Minister. but I have to say we had a great deal more to do when we took over in July last year, and frankly we had to reboot the campaign, which we did, and I'm grateful that we've secured it. It has huge military, economic and strategic importance. Can I say I welcome also his continuing support for the action we're taking to support Ukraine. He is absolutely right to call out Putin's remarks at the Shanghai Cooperation Council. And the pressure is now on Putin to prove he wants peace, to do what he says he wants. And while he has sat down to discuss peace with President Trump in Alaska, he's been turning up his attacks, of course, in Ukraine. He launched this war. He can stop this war tomorrow if he chooses. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Right Honourable Gentleman asks about sanctions. He encourages us to take the steps further. He'll know that we've introduced already over 500 new sanctions against individuals, entities and ships. We've sanctioned 289 vessels as part of the Russian Shadow Fleet, and very soon the Foreign Secretary will announce further UK steps. On the security guarantees, the commitments we've secured already from many of those involved in the discussion are substantial. The discussions continue. We look for contributions to be further confirmed. Much of the shape of any deployment of a coalition of the willing will depend on the terms of any peace agreement. And at this stage, I certainly won't want to offer any more public details on that, because that would only reinforce Putin's hand and make him and the Russians wiser.
Chair of the Select Committee, Tamanjeet Singh Desi.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Defence Secretary for advance sight of his statement. Wholeheartedly welcome the historic frigates exports deal with Norway, and join him in paying tribute to Chief of the Defence Staff Admiral Radakin for his distinguished decades-long service to our country. Now, recent Russian attacks across 14 different regions of Ukraine are not actions of peace. Words and actions must align, and it is abundantly clear that both from President Putin present a threat to us all. So with such drastic escalation of Putin's violence, and that running concurrently with peace negotiations, along with Putin's false reframing of his invasion as some sort of reaction to a Western-backed coup, can my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, shed further light on what steps, what levers he has pulled to help enable a peaceful outcome?
Secretary of State.
It's a truism that peace is secured through strength. And our task, those countries like the UK that strongly support Ukraine, is to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position on the battlefield and at any negotiating table. That means stepping up military support for Ukraine now, which we are doing, and we will do further in next week's UDCG meeting that I will co-chair. We are stepping that up with further economic pressure on Putin, which the House will have a chance to hear more about, and the Foreign Secretary will announce further measures soon. And it means also stepping up our preparations for securing any peace for the long term if Trump can help lead negotiations that will lead to a ceasefire and a peace agreement. That is the way that we support Ukraine now. That is the way that we can help reinforce the steps towards the possibility of peace tomorrow. And I just say to my honourable friend, the Defence Select Committee Chair, and to the honourable gentleman from the opposition benches, I will ensure that Admiral Radakin tomorrow is aware of the kind comments, and I know he will appreciate that from both sides of the House.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Helen Maguire.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Defence Secretary for advance sight of his statement. I'd also like to join others in the House today in thanking Admiral Sir Tony Radakin for his service and wish him well on his next steps. Yeah. I was relieved to see the Prime Minister join fellow European leaders in Washington last month, standing shoulder to shoulder with President Zelensky, and in the wake of Donald Trump's fawning appeasement of Vladimir Putin in Alaska. Despite that show of support, I still fear that Trump would prefer to secure a quick and easy carve-up of Ukraine, rather than work to secure a peace which provides justice for Ukraine and guarantees its sovereignty against future Russian aggression. That's why I believe the government needs to continue to lead from the front, but to take our European partners with us. We really need to bolster Ukraine's defence and punish Putin. In that vein, can the Secretary of State update the House on what progress, if any, has been made on the seizing of the billions in frozen Russian assets across the G7? Can he also update us on whether any assessment has been made about the volume and quality of weaponry which the siege of those assets could help fund for Kyiv, or to what use the assets could be used to support the rebuilding of Ukraine? We must also be tightening the screws on Putin's war chest. I welcome the new £10 billion contract with Norway and the British jobs and businesses that it will support in the UK, and this further demonstrates the need for us to work with our northern European allies in the fight against the aggression from Russia. And I'm pleased that the government has taken a step to further cut the Kremlin profits through a reduction in the oil price cap, but this measure must be accompanied by more work to crack down on the Russia's shadow fleet, as it continues to trade and transport oil sold above the price cap. A joined-up approach between us and our allies is absolutely vital. So will the Secretary of State commit to expanding the UK's designation of vessels in the shadow fleet, including those already sanctioned by the EU, Canada and the US, and will he seek reciprocal designations from those partners? As we reach a critical moment in negotiations, we need to be taking all the steps we can to provide Ukraine with the leverage and military material it needs. So will the Secretary of State consider sending UK Typhoon jets for use by the Ukrainian Air Force?
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome her strong focus on the need for further economic pressure on Putin and on Russia. She will recognise that the UK is out ahead of many other countries in the number of vessels we've now sanctioned as part of the Russian shadow fleet. I say to her, we are always ready to take further steps to do that. And I hope that she will see from the Foreign Secretary very soon the UK determination to go further still on economic pressure and on sanctions. She invites me to offer an update on the progress on use of seized assets. I'm unable to do that, but she'll know that this is not just a matter if this will be effective for a UK decision, and the detailed work that is still being discussed with other key allies does continue. We recognise the potential of being able to use those seized assets from Russia to help rebuild and support Ukraine, but that is something that we are working on. She urges us to lead European allies. I think it's not unreasonable to say that is exactly what we are doing, not just with the highest level of military aid this year ever from the UK, but the way that we've stepped in now to lead the UDCG, and I will chair the 30th meeting alongside Minister Pistorius next week. And we've stepped in with the French by leading the coalition of the willing. More than 50 nations, part of the discussions about planning for Ukraine's long-term future, and I will host the defence ministers alongside Minister Le Cornu this week to discuss that further. But one point for her, the Honourable Lady in this House. Often seen as the European Coalition of the Willing or the European UDCG, these are coalitions of nations that go well beyond Europe. And I was in Japan last week, and so Prime Minister Ishiba at Japan has joined the discussions for the Coalition of the Willing, and some of the most stalwart supporters of Ukraine in military aid since the start of the Russian invasion have been allies of ours, steadfast supporters of Ukraine from other parts of the world, from Australia to Japan to New Zealand to Korea. And it just signals for Putin, not just that Europe stands steadfast with Ukraine in challenging and confronting his aggression, but we see this as a security matter in the Euro-Atlantic, which is indivisible, as many other countries do, with security in the Indo-Pacific too.
Alex Baker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Defence Secretary for this update and his continued leadership on this issue. We've all been so moved by the extraordinary bravery and resilience of the Ukrainian people in the face of Russian aggression. And in my constituency, we know how important it is to stand by our friends in Ukraine. In my constituency, I also had the privilege of being able to visit our armed forces and our industry and see how much actually they have been inspired themselves by our Ukrainian colleagues and their innovation on the battlefield. So can I ask the Secretary of State to have a bit of an update on the important lessons that the MOD have learnt from Ukrainians' innovation on the battlefield?
Secretary of State.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. It isn't just that the courage of the Ukrainians is an inspiration to us all, including our own forces. It is that their ability to fight and innovate in combat is also an inspiration to us. We try to capture this in the Strategic Defence Review that we published in June. It points the way to the sort of radical transformation that we require in our own armed forces and our own defence system. And I hope that my honourable friend will see the hallmarks of that very soon when we publish the Defence Industrial Strategy.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith.
Deputy Speaker, a few weeks ago I returned from Ukraine with some others that have been delivering trucks and medical aid to the Ukrainians for use in the front line, a number of trips that I've done with others I can see across the floor as well here, united as the government is united with the opposition and the other parties. But however, having watched the brutality stepped up by President Putin in the recent weeks and following from the Alaskan conference at Anchorage, I must say I am fundamentally still very disappointed. Yes, the government is right. They're bringing together a coalition of the willing. But the least willing of all at the moment seems to be the White House. And my concern is, without the White House's commitment to showing Putin that his actions have consequences, then this drags on again and again. They are the one country that can really impress upon him that if they carry on with these attacks, they will be sanctioned dramatically and the weapons will flow like water to the Ukrainians that they desperately need. I wonder if the government, behind closed doors, could say to the President, it is time to follow your words with actions and not keep on prevaricating.
Secretary of State.
I appreciate the argument that the honourable gentleman makes. It's important to recognise that the role of President Trump is essential and central into any opportunity to bring the two sides together. He is playing a role that only President Trump can play. And he has made clear that on the range of further steps, if they become necessary, at his disposal for his decision, is including stepping up economic pressure on President Putin. And we are ready to respond alongside that. We are also ready to take our own decisions on economic pressure on President Putin and on Russia. It has got to be part of what I said to my honourable friend, the Defence Secretary, Select Committee Chair. It is part of trying to ensure that the pressure on Putin, the support for Ukraine, brings the two sides more rapidly to the negotiating table, and we can get that peace that we all secure.
Douglas McAllister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My Western Bartonshire constituents know the importance of standing shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine in this fight. Does the Minister agree that investments such as the £250 million to HMNB Clyde and the landmark £10 billion deal with Norway, both of which secures thousands of jobs on the Clyde, many of whom live in my Western Bartonshire constituency, all help to show our strength and deter future Russian aggression?
State.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and it's a lesson that we took and have to take seriously from Ukraine, that particularly when a country is faced with conflict or is forced to fight, its armed forces are only as strong as the industry that stands behind them. And part of the significance of the frigate deal with Norway is that this will reinforce our British shipbuilding, our British innovation and our British technology base across the UK and especially in Scotland for many years to come.
Dr. Andrew Murison.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I too congratulate Admiral Sir Tony Radakin and Air Chief Marshal Sir Rich Knighton and wish them well. A big well done too to all involved in the Type 26 deal, including my honourable friend, the member for South Suffolk. And if I may say to the Defence Secretary to cast his mind back to March, when I asked the Prime Minister whether it would be folly to put British troops into Ukraine without a US backstop, without a guarantee from the White House, and the Prime Minister agreed it would indeed be folly. Does that remain the government's position?
What is the government's position is that we are discussing the nature of security guarantees, the contribution that we can help lead through the coalition of the willing, alongside any American support, and together that is part of the configuration of making Ukraine strong and creating the circumstances in which serious negotiations and we hope a peace agreement can be reached.
Dr. Zubair Ahmed.
Speaker, can I warmly thank my right honourable friend for getting this Norwegian deal over the line. I feel a singular piece of pride about this because in my constituency of Glasgow South West and Govan will become the epicentre of the Type 26 construction. Will he undertake to work with me to make sure that my constituents in Glasgow South West feel the full benefits of this investment? And in that vein, will he urge the SNP government to finally collaborate with us to dispense their ideological block on the defence sector so together, for want of a better word, we can be stronger for Scotland?
State.
Well, first of all, Madam Deputy Speaker, can I say to my honourable friend, all of us in the House here appreciate the contribution that his constituents as part of that government workforce make to building the outstanding British ships. The Norwegian Prime Minister had a very telling way of explaining the decision on Sunday when he said, we weighed two questions in the decision. Who is our most strategic partner and who has delivered the best frigates? The answer to both is the United Kingdom. And it is also telling, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the nationalist-led Scottish Government has yet to welcome this contract and this success.
Chris Cochran.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Firstly, can I commend the Defence Secretary and Admiral Sir Tony Radakin for your commitment to a just peace in Ukraine. But I do agree with the Right Honourable Member for Washington and Wood Green that the most reluctant member of this coalition of the willing does appear to be President Trump. And so does the Defence Secretary agree with me that it is particularly disappointing that he is unable to give an update on the seizing $300 billion in frozen Russian assets, because the slow progress on that is something that is perhaps our strongest potential lever in exerting pressure on Russia to deliver a just peace.
State.
I don't entirely agree with the honourable gentleman. The commitment that the declaration that the President of the United States has made to making the European-led arrangements for security guarantees, in his words, very secure, is very important and very significant. Those discussions continue. The shape of any potential and possible deployment to support and secure a long-term peace will depend hugely on the nature of the peace agreement itself. And it's for those reasons that it is not possible to set out in public at this stage the details of those. But we continue those discussions both on the nature of the support that can be given to Ukraine in the event of a ceasefire and a peace agreement, and the sort of pressure that may be required to make sure that those serious negotiations can take place.
Emily Darlington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I wanted to share with the House the deepest solidarity from the Ukraine appeal and the Sunflowers Ukrainian Supplementary School in my constituency of Milton Keynes about the recent attacks in Kiev and on the British Council. The British Council's vital cultural initiatives have supported peace and created community cohesion around the world. And it's in that spirit that the Ukraine appeal has created an exhibition, Faces of Ukraine Dreams, by the children who go to their Sunflower School. This exhibition will be touring Milton Keynes, including Bletchley Park. Will the Defence Secretary join with me in expressing our solidarity to the Ukraine families in Milton Keynes, the UK, and still in Ukraine? Slava Ukraine.
Yeah. Secretary of State.
Well, indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, and not just the solidarity with those Ukrainian families and children, but also I'd like to pay tribute to the people of Milton Keynes that have opened their homes to house and home the families of those Ukrainian children. And it is often the children and the families that will feel the threat and the grief most fiercely. And the fact that they have expressed such strong solidarity with those British Council workers in the face of that attack is something that we all appreciate, and I'd be grateful on behalf of the House if she would pass that on.
Sir Julian Lewis.
I'm sure honourable and right honourable members on both sides of the House shared my disgust at the sight of the killer in the Kremlin having a red carpet rolled out for him that might as well have been stained with the blood of all those who've died in the conflict, which is down entirely to him and him alone. But when we talk about meaningful security guarantees, it's perhaps worth remembering, is it not, that the only reason why, when Germany was divided at the end of the Second World War, that was a stable division, was that both sides knew that anybody crossing a line would be initiating an international conflict. Surely any security guarantee that doesn't automatically guarantee the involvement of other states in the defence of Ukraine will not be worth the paper on which it's written.
Secretary of State.
So the purpose of the coalition of the willing force that we are leading the work to plan for is about actively securing the Ukrainian skies, actively making the Ukrainian seas safe, and providing a presence that will help reassure as well as help build up the Ukrainians to deter and defend for themselves. It starts from the first premise that in the circumstances of a peace agreement, for the medium term and long term, the strongest defence, the strongest deterrence is the nature and strength of the Ukrainian armed forces themselves. That is our purpose, and that would be part of our mission.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I firstly start by thanking my right honourable friend and his whole team for the incredible efforts that they're making on this issue. Over the weekend, Russia launched yet more devastating airstrikes in Kyiv, killing 23 people, including a 2-year-old child. July was the deadliest month of conflict since its early stages, with over 280 civilians killed and more than 1,300 injured. Russia has once again shown its blatant disregard for human life, targeting, abducting, indoctrinating and even weaponising children. Can the Secretary of State set out what further steps he is taking to ensure Ukraine has the means to defend itself from these heinous, heinous crimes?
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I pay tribute to my honourable friend for the campaigning that she is doing, not just on Ukraine generally, but in particular to draw attention to this systematic program that we've seen from Putin and his troops of abducting Ukrainian children, trying to indoctrinate them into the Russian way of life. And can I say to her, in the discussions that I've had with Secretary Umarov when he was Defense Minister and now as Secretary of the Ukrainian National Security and Defense Council, he is leading the negotiations on behalf of President Zelensky, and some of the early discussions potentially with the Russian side are about prisoner of war swaps and about the return of those Ukrainian children.
Stephen Geffins.
Deputy Speaker, can I welcome the Norwegian investment in Glasgow's shipyards? They understand, the Norwegians understand the importance of European security. The Norwegians understand the importance of territorial integrity. The Norwegians understand the importance of the High North, and I pay credit to those in my own constituency at RM Condor for their own work in that particular area. They know that Donetsk is Ukrainian, Luhansk is Ukrainian, Crimea is Ukrainian. Now, the US ambassador to NATO said recently that no chunks that were not, and I quote, earned on the battlefield should be given over to Russia. When he meets with his US counterpart in a couple of weeks' time, can he be clear that no chunks of Ukraine are earned by aggressors on the battlefield, and Ukraine's integrity, territorial integrity, is testament regardless of our political allegiance here?
Secretary of State.
The Ukrainians are fighting for their territorial integrity. The Ukrainians are doing the fighting. It's for the Ukrainians to decide when to stop fighting and the terms on which they do so. Our job in the UK, my job as Defence Secretary, is to ensure that we give them the maximum possible support in the fight, and we'll give them maximum support possible as they go into the negotiations. And can I just say, to finish, the declaration that he fully supports, and I hope he can speak on behalf of his party, for that the biggest ever British warship export deal is welcome in this House.
Alex Sobel.
And Deputy Speaker, I want to start by paying tribute to Andrei Parubi, the former Ukrainian speaker, who was brutally assassinated in his home city, Lviv. He played a key role in the Maidan protests, which freed Ukraine of Russian interference. I really thank my right honourable friend for raising the issue of the British Council attack in Kyiv. A man was injured. We need to remember the British Council isn't just any body. It's an arm's-length body of the FCDO. It takes British culture and values and English language teaching around the world. In the same attack, the EU delegation building was also attacked. And we heard tonight from Bulgaria that Ursula von der Leyen's plane was jammed by Russia and had difficulty landing and to use paper maps to land. We're hearing more and more, I'm afraid, on the streets that this war is a matter for Ukraine and Russia. But I think everybody in this chamber knows that if Ukraine falls, it won't end there. And this is a war for all of us, and Ukraine are fighting for all of us. And I'd like my friend to reassure me that we are making very clear that we know that Putin's aggression will not stop at Ukraine if Ukraine fails, and they are fighting for all of us, and we'll give them all the support that they need to ensure that we are all free in Europe.
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend speaks plainly and strongly. Can I recognise the work that he's done on Ukraine, just in the way that President Zelensky did last month when he awarded my honourable friend the Order of Merit from Ukraine Defence Support. Can I say to him also, he's right to remind the House of the recent assassination of Andrei Parubi, and it is something that should be it's a reminder of the brutality of the invasion, and in many ways this wasn't just Andrei was not just a leader in the Maidan uprising. He's an ex-speaker of the Ukrainian parliament, and in many ways his assassination brings home just how serious this is to us in this House. And finally, the point my honourable friend makes, which is if Putin prevails in Ukraine, he won't stop at Ukraine, is one of the reasons that the British public, the British House of Commons and the British government remain so strongly steadfast in our support for Ukraine.
Sir John Whittingdale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's 17 days since President Trump rolled out the red carpet to Putin, during which time, as he has said, Russia has stepped up its bombardment of Ukraine with drones and missiles. And can I thank him for his remarks about Andrei Parubi, the former Speaker of the Rada. I knew him well and admired him hugely. And actually, last time I met him was when we entertained him in this House as the visiting Speaker who came here. And it is a mark of Putin's hatred of democracy that he regarded the democratic Speaker of a Parliament as a appropriate target. Does the Secretary of State agree that Putin at the present time shows no interest in a ceasefire? And will he do whatever he can to persuade President Trump that the only way that Putin can be made to consider a ceasefire is by stepping up the pressure on Russia through extra sanctions and by giving ever more support to Ukraine?
Secretary of State.
I think the whole House appreciates the right honourable gentleman's remarks about Andrei Parubi and appreciates the relationship that he had with him. On the question of pressure on Putin to come to the negotiating table, that is a matter for it's a matter for the nations that stand with Ukraine, and we're determined to play our role. It is also a matter that is recognised by the US and the US President. He wants Putin to come to the table. He wants Putin now to start to act in the way that he says, which is interested in peace, ready to talk about peace, but at the moment not yet showing enough sign of doing so.
Luke Charters.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. To secure the peace in the long term for Ukraine, we need to support its defence industrial base and therefore the financial sector that underpins it. But I'm concerned that UK export finance red tape could be limiting UK-Ukraine defence partnerships. And I also believe we could launch new joint defence innovation funds. Would my right honourable friend consider carefully these ideas and work with me to discuss how we can support Ukraine's defence financing system too?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the short answer is yes. The slightly longer answer is that we are already working hard with Ukraine on some of these questions of joint ventures, joint industrial partnerships, and indeed our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, in June with President Zelensky, declared when he visited Downing Street that this is an area of reinforcing our industrial connections and joint enterprise that will help Ukraine in the fight now, will help develop Ukrainian industry, but could bring benefits to us and our armed forces in the future.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I congratulate the Secretary of State and all those involved in the Type 26 frigate deal, which is great news for all and for economic growth, and reiterate our continuing support for Ukraine and also to this government and the Secretary of State to working with other world leaders in trying to secure a ceasefire. And I suppose we shouldn't be surprised by Putin's appalling continuation of bombing Ukraine. And can I urge the Secretary of State to work with other world leaders to use the leverage that I think we still have of the $300 billion of frozen central bank assets that I think could help in the negotiations with Putin.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the honourable gentleman? I note his view on the frozen Russian assets, and I welcome his declaration of support for Ukraine and his condemnation of Vladimir Putin. The all-party nature of the support for Ukraine in this House is very important, and it is particularly welcome that he's here this afternoon and he makes that clear for the Reform Party.
Serena Brackenridge.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Russia's aggression directly threatens our security here at home. Does my right honourable friend agree that the push for peace matters not just for Ukrainian people, but for all of our security? And we must invest in the defence industry in constituencies like Wolverhampton North East to deter Russian aggression and stand in solidarity with Ukraine.
State.
I do indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. If for a moment this House considers a situation in which Putin prevails in Ukraine, it is not hard to see how that makes Europe less secure, and a strong Ukraine is essential for a secure UK and a secure Europe in the future. My honourable friend urges us to do more to reinforce the British defence industrial base and the record increase in defence spending that this government is now committed to investing since the end of the Cold War will be an important part of that, and I hope she'll welcome the defence industrial strategy when we publish that shortly.
Sir Desmond Swing.
Given the red carpet treatment afforded to Putin, will the Secretary of State remind our principal ally that it is our co-signatory to the Budapest Memorandum?
Yes.
Yep. Very good.